If you've been in church for a while, you've probably heard us talk about some churchy things. And when I say churchy, I mean topics like forgiving other people, praying, reading your Bible, having faith during tough times, connecting with people who are following God. Topics like these are great, and we need to talk about them. But today, it's not one of those days. Today, we're gonna talk about something that's a bit more practical and maybe even more spiritual than you think. So, let's talk about vaping. Some of you may be thinking, well, I'm good in this area. I wouldn't even know how to get my hands on a vape if I wanted to. Others of you may be thinking, seriously? This was the one thing I thought I could do without the church coming down on me and making me feel guilty about. I guess even that's gonna get ruined today. Okay, hang tight. That's not the point of today. Whether you vape, or you know people who vape, or you've never even heard of vaping, let me assure you that this week is for everyone. Because believe it or not, this talk isn't really about vaping. Okay, I know I said it was, and it kind of is, but this talk is really about something bigger. It's about how we decide to do what we do. Vaping just happens to be the example we're using. So even if smoking itself is irrelevant to you today, today's discussion won't be. But I want you to know that the goal of today isn't to make those of you who do vape feel terrible about yourselves. If I'm honest, the goal isn't even to make you quit. Likewise, the goal of today isn't to make people who aren't vaping feel like you're better than people who do. There's a greater lesson here that I think is important for all of us to know. Vaping is just the running illustration for the principle we're gonna be talking about today. Now, when it comes to vaping, it's easy to understand why you may think it's a strange thing to talk about. For starters, there are way worse things to do besides vaping. So why aren't we talking about those? Like, vaping isn't even as bad as smoking cigarettes, is it? It's not like you're drunk and driving around the neighborhood in your mom's minivan. It's not like using hard drugs. It's just vaping. I mean, wasn't vaping invented to be a safe alternative to things that were worse? Isn't vaping the socially acceptable thing people can do in their homes and restaurants? It's an improvement. So if we were gonna talk about anything, why not the things that are way worse? Plus, vaping doesn't seem to hurt other people, and there may actually be some people here who have parents who are okay with it. So if we're talking about something in the church that even some parents don't have a problem with, could it really be worth spending an entire day talking about it? In other words, for those of you who are considering vaping or know people who are doing it, you may have wondered, is this even a big deal? Do I need to talk to my small group leader about it? Or is it so minor that it's not even worth a conversation? Or you may say, with confidence, I can definitely tell you this is not a big deal. Why in the world would we take a week to talk about it here? We'll get there. But first, I want to be clear that this topic has nothing to do with God's love. Meaning whether you vape or not, it has no effect on how God feels about you. God's love isn't fragile and it isn't based on our decisions. He's not waiting to see what kind of decision you make about things like vaping to decide whether or not he loves you. God doesn't love you more if you don't vape, and he doesn't love you less if you do. Our worth has already been determined. Nothing we can do can change it. Also, this week isn't about judging others either. Chances are, at some point in your life, you're gonna be around people who vape and smoke and drink and do all kinds of other stuff for that matter. You may be even around people who do drugs. Today isn't about getting more information so you can do a better job at judging people who make decisions you don't approve of or think God doesn't approve of. So if this conversation on vaping isn't about church guilt, God's love, or judging others, what is it about? It's about learning how to make good decisions over things that don't seem like a big deal in the moment, but maybe bigger than we realize. And if you and I can learn how to make decisions in moments when decisions don't seem like a big deal, we'll leave with a tool that will benefit us for the rest of our lives. To do that, we're gonna look in a book in the Bible that is all about practical wisdom. It's called Proverbs, and most of it was written by an ancient king named Solomon, who is considered the wisest man who ever lived, which is not a bad thing to be known for. A lot of people believe he wrote Proverbs for his sons. It was kind of like, hey, when I'm gone, boys, I want you to remember some things that I've learned through my success and failure. And Solomon had a lot of both. Throughout the whole book, Solomon talks about decisions and the impact they have on people that made them, which is what made him a great leader and ruler. But that didn't always translate into him making stellar decisions for himself. Solomon was simply a guy who had seen so much in his own life or the lives of others that he had some perspective to pass on. Solomon writes this in chapter 4. Don't turn your back on wisdom, for she will protect you. Love her, and she will guard you. Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment. First of all, throughout the book, Solomon talks about wisdom like it's a woman. It's kind of how some of you refer to your car by a name and you call it like he or she. Solomon hasn't lost his mind here. He's just personifying wisdom. So Solomon is basically saying in this passage, when it comes to decisions that don't seem like a big deal, the best thing we can do is not turn our back on wisdom. Ultimately, here's what I think Solomon is getting at. We all have to make decisions all the time. You've probably already noticed that the older you get, the more parts of your life are up to you entirely. And when we make decisions, most of us ask these two questions to figure out the answer. Is it a big deal? Will I get in trouble? Those questions might be the exact questions you're asking about vaping or smoking or drinking or sexting or cheating or any number of different decisions. And they aren't bad questions. Those are important things to know. I just think there's a better question. In his own way, Solomon is telling us the best question to ask is this: is it wise? Figuring out what is wise is more than just figuring out if something is right or wrong, or a big deal or not a big deal. Wisdom is figuring out what's good for you and good for you right now. When it comes to vaping, we can talk, argue, debate, and research, but the end goal needs to be the same. Figuring out if it's good for you and if it's good for you right now. That's wisdom. To develop wisdom around vaping specifically, here are some things that we need to take into consideration. 1, it's bad for you. This isn't just my opinion. According to WebMD.com, some brands contain chemicals including formaldehyde, often used in building materials, and other ingredients used in antifreeze that can cause cancer. Catherine Hess of the University of California and her colleagues studied traces of toxic metals in the e-liquids used in 5 different brands of e-cigarettes. Here's what they concluded. The most concerning of these metals were nickel, chromium, and manganese. Research suggests that nickel and certain forms of chromium may cause cancer. Manganese can harm the nervous system. Okay, that's a big deal. Even if vaping is considered better than other things, that doesn't make it good. And in fact, according to this, it's still bad for you. Number 2, it's a waste of energy and money. Anytime you spend money or energy on something that doesn't help you, it's a waste. Like, for example, if you spend time going to see a counselor, that's probably not a waste of energy and money. Or if you spend time with a math tutor, it's also probably not a waste of energy and money. If you spend time learning to play an instrument, also probably not a waste of energy and money. With vaping, you're paying to put chemicals in your body that could harm you, which makes vaping kind of a waste of energy and money. Third, it can complicate your home life. Anytime you bring something into your home life that can potentially create conflict between you and your parents or step-parents, you're bringing on unnecessary complications. And let's be honest, there are enough complications at home already. Fourth, it starts the lying and hiding cycle. If your parents start to ask questions about what you're doing, whether that's drinking, smoking pot, smoking cigarettes, or vaping, lying and hiding it is usually how we respond, whether we plan to or not. Lying leads to hiding, which leads to more lying, and on it goes. And anything that encourages lying and hiding can't be good for you. Last, it's illegal. This is the most sound good judgment argument I can bring to the table against vaping. And when you choose to do something illegal, even if it isn't that big of a deal, you always risk complicating your future. With all this being said, I want to come back to the core issue we talked about today: how you make decisions. Vaping is just one thing in life you'll have to decide about. And when it comes to making any life decisions, the best question we can ask is it wise? So how do you know if something's wise? How do you get wisdom exactly? Well, James, who is the brother of Jesus, said this: "If you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking." Asking God for wisdom is key when it comes to our decisions that don't seem like that big of a deal. Because you may not know what's right or what's right for you in that moment, but God does. Even better, one of the key ways that God gives us wisdom and helps us use good judgment is through other people. God gives wisdom through prompting our conscience, Bible verses, and time spent in prayer. But that's not all he does. Older, wiser people can bring us a perspective that helps us see what feels like a cloudy decision with greater clarity. The key is not to make decisions about things that don't seem like they're a big deal without help from people stronger and wiser than you. Think of it this way. Don't make small decisions alone. When I say small decisions, I mean decisions that don't seem like a big deal in the moment. I mean decisions where you're tempted to tell yourself, it's not a big deal, or I won't get in trouble. In those moments, bring in other wise people. If you don't vape, I wanna say this to you. Instead of judging people who do, focus on getting wisdom for yourself, because that's the wisest thing you can do. The wisest thing that you can do right now is not judge people who are making different decisions than you. The wisest thing you can do is get wisdom for your life, friendships, school, family, dating life, and relationships with authority. Because there will come a time when a decision will feel unclear or not that big of a deal, and then you will be glad you developed good judgment and pursued wisdom so you can count on it when you need it. And if you do vape, I want to remind you of what I said at the beginning. This is not about God's love. God doesn't love you less because you vape or do something you consider worse than vaping. God doesn't have an insecure, shaky, unstable love for you. This is about how you owe it to yourself to ask yourself why you do what you do. You owe it to yourself to make decisions now that set you up for more success and more wisdom and good judgment in the future. If you can figure this out now, you set yourself up for a better future. Listen, whether you're a student in the room or an adult, one of the single biggest factors in the quality of your life now and later is your ability to make decisions. Most people never get past the, is this a big deal or will I get in trouble stages? And the results of those kind of decisions almost always lead to hurt and pain. But if you can change your question, you are setting yourself up for a better now and a better future. So remember what we said earlier. Don't make small decisions alone. Invite people in. Not your best friends or people you know will tell you what you want to hear. Bring God in. Bring someone older and wiser than you. Someone who's not judgy, but loves you and wants what's best for you and can help you make better decisions, big and small.